Kawhi Leonard I know. Doing nothing and getting paid for it.
Currently under federal investigation for fraud.
Whether the Clippers circumvented the salary cap.
For the first time in more than a decade, the NBA may have stepped in to stop another blockbuster trade. And somehow, this situation could be even crazier than when the league prevented Chris Paul from teaming up with Kobe Bryant. Kawhi Leonard was reportedly being sent back to the Toronto Raptors, and the Clippers were prepared to send him back to the franchise he helped lead to its first championship. Toronto was willing to sacrifice multiple players and valuable draft picks to complete the deal. Everything appeared to be lining up for one of the most shocking reunions in NBA history until the Raptors made a shocking announcement. The league supposedly warned Toronto that if the Raptors acquired Kawhi, they could also inherit some of the risks connected to the investigation. That warning was apparently enough for Toronto to place the trade on hold. The proposed trade would have sent Kawhi Leonard back to the Toronto Raptors, where he produced one of the greatest seasons in franchise history. In exchange, the Clippers were expected to receive a package involving Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, and a huge collection of draft compensation. Toronto was reportedly willing to include multiple first-round picks, second-round picks, and additional pick swap compensation to bring Kawhi back. It would have been one of the most aggressive moves of the offseason and one of the most emotional reunions basketball fans had seen in years. Kawhi only spent one season in Toronto, but that single season changed the franchise forever. The Raptors acquired him from the San Antonio Spurs in 2018, even though there was no guarantee that he would remain in Canada after his contract expired. Toronto took the risk anyway, and Kawhi rewarded them by leading the organization to its first NBA championship. He hit the iconic Game 7 buzzer beater against the Philadelphia 76ers, helped defeat Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, and then won Finals M5P after Toronto defeated the Golden State Warriors. After the championship, Raptors fans desperately wanted Kawhi to stay. Toronto had proven it could build a championship roster around him, and the entire country was prepared to treat him like a legend. However, Kawhi ultimately decided to return home to Southern California and sign with the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers also traded an enormous number of assets for Paul George, giving Kawhi the second superstar he wanted beside him. At the time, Los Angeles appeared to have created the NBA's next dynasty. The Clippers had an elite two-way superstar in Kawhi, another all-NBA level player in Paul George, and one of the richest owners in professional sports. Steve Ballmer was willing to spend whatever was necessary to turn the Clippers into a championship organization. The team eventually constructed the Intuit Dome, assembled expensive supporting casts, and repeatedly entered seasons as one of the favorites to win the Western Conference. However, the Kawhi era never reached the level everyone expected. The Clippers blew a 3-1 lead against the Denver Nuggets during the 2020 playoffs. Kawhi later suffered major knee injuries. Paul George dealt with injuries of his own, and the team repeatedly entered the postseason without its full roster available. Los Angeles eventually reached the Western Conference Finals for the first time in franchise history, but Kawhi was unable to play because of an ACL injury. Every year seemed to follow the same pattern. The Clippers looked dangerous. Kawhi played like a superstar when healthy, and then an injury destroyed their championship hopes. Eventually, the Clippers allowed Paul George to leave and began changing the roster surrounding Kawhi. They were no longer operating like the organization that had sacrificed everything to build a championship team in 2019. Kawhi was getting older. The Clippers had limited control over many of their future draft picks, and the organization needed to consider what life would look like after him. That is why trading Kawhi to Toronto suddenly began to make sense. Toronto was not only trading for the memory of Kawhi Leonard either. Despite his age and injury history, Kawhi was coming off one of the most productive offensive seasons of his career. When healthy, he remained an incredibly efficient scorer, a dangerous isolation player, and someone capable of completely taking over important games. The Raptors apparently believed that he could still help them compete at a high level, especially in an Eastern Conference that could be more open than it had been in previous seasons. However, Toronto would have been accepting a massive amount of risk. Kawhi is now in his mid-30s and has experienced several serious knee injuries. The Raptors would have been giving up Brandon Ingram, a young shooter in Grady Dick, in years of valuable draft control. If Kawhi suffered another injury, Toronto could lose both its present roster and a large portion of its future. The deal was already dangerous before the NBA investigation became a factor. That investigation centers on a company called Aspiration. Aspiration presented itself as an environmentally focused financial company and developed a major business relationship with the Clippers. The company agreed to an enormous sponsorship partnership with the organization, while Steve Ballmer also personally invested millions of dollars into it. Aspiration was supposed to become an important partner connected to the Clippers' new arena and the team's environmental initiatives. The situation became far more suspicious after Aspiration experienced severe financial problems and eventually entered bankruptcy proceedings. Documents connected to the company reportedly revealed that a business associated with Kawhi Leonard was owed millions of dollars. Additional reports then alleged that Kawhi had agreed to a 4-year endorsement contract worth approximately $28 million. An NBA superstar receiving a $28 million endorsement contract is not automatically unusual. The league's biggest players regularly earn millions through shoe companies, beverages, clothing brands, and other businesses. Kawhi is a 2-time NBA champion and a 2-time Finals MVP, so a company wanting to associate itself with him would make sense. However, investigators allegedly became interested in whether Kawhi actually performed enough promotional work to justify the size of the agreement. There were reportedly very few major advertisements, public appearances, or visible promotional campaigns connecting Kawhi with Aspiration. Fans could not remember seeing Kawhi regularly discuss the company, appear in commercials for it, or promote it heavily on social media. Reports also suggested that the agreement may have given Kawhi significant control over whether he participated in promotional activities. That raised an extremely serious question. Was Aspiration paying Kawhi for legitimate endorsement work, or was the company being used to provide him with extra compensation outside his NBA contract? That distinction could determine everything. The NBA has strict salary cap rules controlling how much teams can pay their players. Teams are not allowed to secretly give players additional money through outside businesses in order to convince them to sign a contract. If that were allowed, the league's richest owners could simply arrange sponsorship deals, investments, or fake endorsement agreements to offer players far more money than other teams could legally provide. For example, imagine the Clippers offered Kawhi the maximum salary allowed under league rules. If Steve Ballmer then secretly arranged for a company connected to him to give Kawhi another $28 million, the Clippers would have gained an unfair advantage. Competing teams such as the Raptors or Lakers would be restricted by the salary cap, while Los Angeles could potentially use Ballmer's outside business relationships to increase its offer. If the NBA believes something like that happened, it would represent a major case of salary cap circumvention. However, none of those accusations have been proven. Steve Ballmer and the Clippers have denied wrongdoing. Ballmer has argued that he was also harmed by Aspiration and lost money through his investment in the company. His position is that investing in Aspiration did not give him complete control over every decision the company made. The Clippers have maintained that they followed NBA rules and have cooperated with the league's investigation. It is also possible that Aspiration independently believed Kawhi was worth $28 million as a spokesperson. The company may have wanted to associate itself with one of the most recognizable athletes in Los Angeles, even if Kawhi did not appear in a large number of public advertisements. An endorsement contract looking unusual does not automatically prove that the Clippers secretly arranged it. The NBA will likely need direct financial records, messages, emails, or witness testimony demonstrating that the agreement was connected to Kawhi's NBA contract. The timing of the investigation created an enormous problem for Toronto. The Raptors could complete the trade, send several players and draft picks to Los Angeles, and then discover that Kawhi's contract or playing status had been affected by the NBA's findings. Even though Toronto would not have been responsible for anything that allegedly happened while Kawhi played for the Clippers, the Raptors could still be left holding a damaged asset if Kawhi's contract does indeed get voided. Toronto could lose years of assets for a player who might never provide what the organization expected. The NBA even brought in outside investigators to examine the allegations, showing how seriously the league is treating the situation. The NBA has made Toronto aware of that possibility, and the Raptors decided that the trade was too dangerous to complete until the investigation concluded. The league did not necessarily tell Toronto that it was forbidden from acquiring Kawhi. It only needed to explain the risk. Once the Raptors realized they could inherit the consequences of the investigation, they had almost no choice but to stop the transaction. The investigation could also cause Toronto to change its offer. The Raptors may decide that Kawhi is no longer worth the original package after seeing the amount of uncertainty surrounding him. Toronto could remove one of the first-round picks, ask the Clippers to accept different players, or demand protections if Kawhi becomes unavailable.